It's Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we're on the Central Coast. We're joined by Adam Hill. He is a supervisor in San Luis Obispo County. Within his district is Diablo Canyon, the state's only operational nuclear power plant. A few years ago, it was not the only operational nuclear power plant. San Onofre in North San Diego County was operating. It had its issues and closed down. There's rumblings about the future of Diablo.
Yeah. Recently, well, they're in the process of all the reviews with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and there have to be a series of decisions made, even by PG&E themselves,
the owner,
right, about how much they want to invest and how far they want to go.
And PG&E had its challenges a few years back with the San Bruno gas explosion, completely unconnected to Diablo. Different energy source,
right.
But they were in the news, and there was some suggestion they weren't the best corporate partner or player. Yet in San Luis Obispo County, as I understand it, they're considered a very effective corporate partner.
Yeah, they've been very good in this community, and their safety record at the plant has been really terrific.
What's confusing to me, and I'm aging myself, I remember in the 70s, my aunt would take me to anti-nuclear power rallies.
Yeah.
I was that kid that was going to the anti-nuclear power rallies. But since the 70s, some folks feel as if, well, if handled safely, nuclear is pretty darn green.
Yeah.
And so the anti-nuke power forces are not as powerful as they used to be.
Yeah, well, certainly there are a lot of opponents still who would argue with that that definition.
But not like it used to be.
No, and I think, to be honest with you, they've succeeded in the industry has in this country has not really been able to advance as far as it should, as you've seen in other countries around the world.
So what's your sense of nuclear power?
My sense is that, and aside from Diablo itself, where I think that the safety issues regarding seismic are real and they need to be addressed, and if the authorities that oversee it feel good about it, then that's their job. It's not our authority. But in the larger question that you ask, when you have a state that has the most aggressive and I think progressive climate change policies, you have to look at everything, and to take off a source of baseload power that in its scale is much smaller and in its power is much bigger than anything we have. We have 10 miles of solar PV in our community, and that's 10 miles.
Yes.
And it's a lot bigger than the footprint that you need to have a nuclear facility, and it doesn't produce even what one reactor can produce, and it only produces it a few hours a day.
Right. So the question becomes earthquake safety,
because
that is a viable one.
Right.
For whatever reason, Diablo Canyon was built where it was built.
Right.
But we now know it was built near a couple of faults. A fault discovered, I think, in the 70s, a fault discovered more recently. There had been discussions, sir, about doing an advanced study on those faults, and the Coastal Commission ultimately declined because of environmental concerns about impacts to marine life. Are you comfortable with where we are today in terms of the safety of Diablo and earthquake catastrophe?
I'm comfortable with how they operate and comfortable with what we know now, and I'm also comfortable with the studies that still are being conducted and the studies that are kind of wrapping up. And we have an independent peer review panel, which my colleague Bruce Gibson is a member of as a geophysicist.
He is a member of the Board of Supervisors and a PhD scientist in geophysics, I think.
So we feel like we will have the best information from the necessary agencies that review it.
So let's talk about the review, because I guess the first and most important reviewer is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Correct.
They have been asked to renew the license fairly early, actually. I don't think it expires until 2024.
2022 and
whatever it may be, but they're ready to go pretty soon. What's your sense of the NRC?
I think they are likely to see that it operates well and that the seismic studies have been able to show, this is my guess, that the NRC will most likely grant it permission to relicense.
But they are not the only entity that needs to grant relicensing. In California, there are 3 other entities.
Correct.
The State Lands Commission, the Coastal Commission, and the State Water Board.
Yeah.
They also are involved.
Right.
Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, potential Governor Gavin Newsom, is on the State Lands Commission. He recently made some statements that can only be described as concerning for the supporters of Diablo Canyon.
Right.
What's your sense?
Yeah, that's raised a lot of I think public comment when they heard the lieutenant governor who's running for governor make those comments that he couldn't foresee the plant operating beyond its license or even maybe before it ends.
Why is that? I mean, is there a hangover from San Onofre?
There could be, and I think that in terms of environmentalists, most don't support nuclear power for a variety of reasons that may not necessarily apply to this. But there's also a lot of environmentalists who feel like we won't be able to address climate change as much as we need to and as quickly as we need to without nuclear power.
But as I understand it, San Onofre, I misspoke. Diablo provides, is it 10% of the state's power needs?
About that to the grid, yeah.
Yeah, 10%. Where do we get the 10% if all of a sudden that 10% is gone?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, most likely PG&E would invest in cheap gas. Which the trade-off
Is this
there is
natural gas?
Natural gas, which pollutes.
Right.
And the process
Not
of
as
getting
bad
it
as
not as bad as
Right.
some other things like coal and
Right.
and other polluting sources, but it pollutes. It creates greenhouse gases. It's the process of getting that gas is highly controversial, and it also produces methane, which is extremely problematic.
You're in an interesting situation. You are the supervisor. You are the representative for Diablo Canyon in a county where I believe Diablo is the biggest employer.
Biggest private employer.
Private employer, and so that shuts down. San Luis Obispo County is hurting.
That would be true, and that's the concern. There's so much there's not much you can do to replace an anchor employer like that. I mean, car companies pull out of a place that
the town goes.
The town goes flat.
Yeah, we know what happened in the Rust Belt.
Right. So we're doing everything we can. Our economy's strong and has diversified really well in new ways over the last decade in tech and specialized manufacturing. But you just can't replace that kind of economic power.
What's also compelling to me, if I may, sir, is that Diablo Canyon is also becoming part of the solution to our water crisis.
Yeah.
Explain, we've talked about it, but for our viewers who didn't hear our last interview, how is a nuclear power plant part of the water diversification process?
That's a great question. We've been working with them. They have a desalination plant that they have to that they've that's been running as long as the plant's been running. Provides all of their on-site freshwater needs, and they only use about 40% of that capacity because that's all they need for the on-site needs.
Sure.
And so I know that other people have come to them before in our community. I'm the one they finally said yes to about doing a project that would allow us to have them run it at full capacity and let us pipe it into our system in South County.
And we know desal is becoming very popular. It's expensive.
It is.
But hopefully the cost will go down. But your friends in Santa Barbara County are putting a desal plant online. Carlsbad, biggest desal plant, I think, in the Western Hemisphere. Cambria has I think, like a hybrid something. And so how does the desal conversation play into the grander conversation?
Well, the desal plant will have to run no matter what. It's not tied to relicensing, and because they even if the license ended, they're going to have to decommission the plant, which would take quite a long time. It's not like you could just say, okay, everybody punch out and we go home.
Oh, really?
You have to. It's a very involved process to decommission a plant, especially a plant that's going to have that much nuclear waste on site because the feds haven't removed it. So they still have to produce fresh water, and we will still be able to get it. That's so we made that clear early on that it's not connected to relicensing, and it wouldn't shut off if in fact they weren't relicensed.
Do you have a sense, sir, as to when we will get definitive decisions?
It would be helpful if we had one by the year's end, because obviously there's a lot of people nervous because our economy is very much attached to PG&E in a lot of ways. They're big contributors to our charities, so it's important.
Okay, he is Adam Hill. He is a supervisor in San Luis Obispo County, where we are today on the Central Coast. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter Local Edition. That's great.
Thank you.
Very interesting conversation.